Greetings, fellow travelers. This is Krotnip, welcoming you all back to the logbook of a simple lindworm traveler. Today's episode sees the forces of the northern tribes face off against the sinister Scions of Yaldabaoth in my second installment of the Battle Report series, The Sagas of the Heroes. Today's battle report is going to be fought over the adventure combination Expanse and Decapitation. First, a few words before getting to the actual battle report. I was extremely happy to see my first attempt at this received so very well, and I want to thank each and every one of you who commented on the video, especially since you gave me some important validation on this stuff being worth doing, and also you were kind enough to point out the stuff that we got wrong, which is really important for learning and doing stuff better the next time around. So please keep your comments coming if you see something we do wrong, if you want to see something changed. I think that I have found more or less the template with which to work these things, so I'm eager to crank out more battle reports going forward. What you're going to be seeing today is going to be more or less in the same style as before, except that I did experiment with taking my photos of the gameplay usually at the end of the activation that the photo is concerning. That didn't pan out so great. I don't like the result as much as what I did the last time around, so expect return to the in the middle of activation photos for the next battle report. A quick reminder, as me and my opponent don't live near each other, we had to prepare the game in advance, so we each prepared our army lists, unaware of what the other would be bringing. Then my opponent sent me their lists for me to paint and pack what he needed, and I sent him my list so that they could familiarize themselves with what I was about to field. So we yet again went into this game knowing more about our opponent's list that we would in a tournament setting, but that's okay. The situation is equal for both of us. This time around, even though we were playing at my buddy's house, I was the one who supplied the terrain, so you will get to see something different from the last time. We prepared our adventure the same way as we did the last time, except that the roles were switched around. So I randomized a set of 3 scenarios and 3 feats for us. Then my opponent vetoed a single scenario out of the punch. I then vetoed a scenario and a feat, and then he vetoed one of the remaining feats, and this led us to the adventure at hand. I'm terribly sorry of the fact that we both misplayed the scenario the last time. I took some special care this time around to read and reread the scenario several times over, and I asked my opponent to check that I wasn't getting this stuff wrong again, so hopefully we played this one the correct way. Anyway, the Expanse is all about controlling 4 objectives of various values on the table. There are 4 brown objectives placed adjacent to the deployment zones, which are in this scenario 6 strides wide. And the objectives that are nearest to each player begin the game controlled by that player's forces. So this is the stuff that we got wrong the last time around, but hey, this time that's actually how it works. The middle objective starts uncontrolled by either player, and there are two ways of effectively scoring via the brown objectives. If a company at the end of the round has the same amount of brown objectives under their control as their opponent, they will score a single military point, and if they have more, they will score 2 military points. And at the same time they end up denying their opponent that 1 point, so that's actually quite a big swing. Also, the side that controls the middle objective, e.a. the blue objective, will gain an additional military point. So this mission is looking like it's going to force our forces to spread out rather wide if we want to try and cover most of the objectives, and it's quite to be expected that scouts and ambushers and maybe in the future cavalry units are the ones that are going to be mostly fighting over the objectives that are placed outside the enemy deployment zone, and the middle objective is the one where most of the infantry-based traditional fighting will take place. As is the case with most, if not downright all, of the scenarios that we have access to in the competitive play document at the moment, games of Expanse have 3 rounds of 5 turns each. The second part of our adventure for today, our feat, is called Decapitation, and as the name suggests, at least for any Infinity enthusiasts out there, this one is mostly about taking out the leader of the opposing force. So each player has to select the leader, commander of their force when they are building their list, and if they have a high command that they are fielding, this obviously has to be the leader. If no high command character is present, player forming their company, building their company, is free to choose any of their officer type characters as their company's leader. In this feat, you not only receive 2 arcane points if you manage to eliminate the enemy commander, and a single arcane point if you manage to keep your own commander alive, but the commander is not allowed to join any units during the game. So the selection of the leader of your company is going to be an extremely impactful one, and while accommodating such challenging circumstances isn't all that bad in a one-off game, I would imagine that if Decapitation is part of a tournament of several rounds and players are only allowed to make a single list, this is going to be causing some trouble or forcing some compromises on some list going forward. In addition to hunting the enemy commander and trying to protect your own, each player also gets to select a single enemy unit as their contract, and destroying this contract unit will award the player who manages to do so a single arcane point also. So players are looking to select a unit that they think is more or less easy to destroy, or at least viable to destroy, and at the same time they are encouraged to run a list that doesn't make choosing and eliminating the contract all too easy. And this all leads us nicely to the companies present here today. When it came the time to choose the commander for my force, I wanted to go with something that would fulfill the requirements of the Decapitation, while at the same time providing some extra oomph for my force, so I chose to run Aalborg. Aalborg is pretty great when ran solo, and I don't expect a lot of missile-based threats coming from the Scions of Yaldabaoth, and even if for whatever reason there was a threat of ranged assassination out there, I could simply stick Aalborg next to a unit of, let's say, orc hunters to keep him more or less safe. Aalborg is a great melee combatant that should be able to go toe-to-toe with almost anything that my opponent decides to throw at him. He provides my force with 3 command tokens for that all-important initiative roll, even though in actual game terms he's going to be consuming, I expect, most if not all of those command tokens himself, due to them being necessary to fuel the Varg and the Crow. I'm looking to get some additional activations via the use of this extremely powerful command skill. Lastly, Aalborg gives me access to the War Alliance ability, which allows me to mix and match Orc and Varann characters and units in this list, which frees up my hands to try something different. I chose to include Njord the Merciless after a long while also in this list. I feel that the 1.5 rules update did a whole lot to increase his power level. Not only are solo fighting capable characters in higher demand now, since detaching from a unit via charging, for example, is more effective and at the very least possible these days, but also he provides my force with 2 command tokens that I really desperately feel that I need. I have some neat and powerful command skills beyond the Varg and the Crow, and I want to be able to access them. Njord does have his own command skill in the form of the Tattoo of the Blood Eagle, but I'm not necessarily worried that I will need to be activating that all that many times, and if that should arise, the occasion should arise, then I guess fine. But some of the time at least I would expect in this list Njord to be able to feed at least one of his command tokens to my other models so that they can make use of their command skills despite themselves only bringing 1, or in the case of the Vice main, 0 command tokens to the table. I chose to attach Njord to the Orc Hunters. He provides the unit with an automatic block symbol that the Orc Hunters can then substitute for a success when defending, allowing them to trade up against more elite enemy units. I think Berserker Rage is extremely powerful ability, especially in the current 1.5 rules environment, where there is more importance placed on the willpower stat of units, especially if there is ever a situation where you need to be rolling for that difficulty 2 test. Njord's willpower of orange and yellow should usually allow you to hit at least one of those, and then you can Berserker Rage for another. And having access to the Varg and the Crow means that I should be able to activate my units at least once more than my opponent during each round, and each additional activation is another chance for me to trigger Berserker Rage and reap its benefits. Also, this combination effectively means that if I need to trigger the Varg and the Crow via an Orc unit, I can activate the Orc Hunters and keep Njord in the unit, and if I need to activate a Varank element to trigger the Varg and the Crow activation on an Orc unit, then I can detach Njord to achieve this also. Next up is my trusty Vice main and the Battle Scarred combination. I've really come to rely on this unit to hold the ground against the toughest of enemies, even though when discussing stuff on the Discord of late, I have been getting some ideas from other players who have been running other combinations to create success. I'm currently extremely enthralled by the idea of actually running the contender with my Battle Scarred, so maybe that's something I should be trying out in the future. My last infantry unit of this company is a squad of Tundra Marauders that I have chosen to attach a Hersir to. The Tundra Marauders I feel got quite a glow up in the 1.5 update, since they are now one of the few units that can actually successfully execute double attacks per activation. I felt that Hersir was an absolute necessary addition to the unit, since he not only adds some decent switches that the Tundra Marauders offensively lack, and some additional automatic damage and a weakish stress modifier, but at the same time the Hersir adds the all-important Berserker Rage via the to die killing ability, and as the Tundra Marauders are potentially able to activate their attack twice per activation, then that means 2 chances to access Berserker Rage for even more damage against enemy forces. The Hersir also makes sure that the Tundra Marauders will never fail a willpower test as long as I'm willing to spend a command token on them, thanks to his not one step back ability. I also feel that the 1.5 update was a big buff to the Hersir, since the Hersir on his own is quite a dangerous piece as long as you are able to access his beefed up Berserker Rage in the form of the Tattoo of Sturkriege. And now that you can charge the Hersir out of the unit at the enemy, enemies have to respect the fact that at any moment the Hersir may come out of his unit swinging, and actually the charge attack of the Hersir, if you are able to access the Tattoo of Sturkriege, is pretty bad bad from your opponent's point of view. So I'm looking to leverage him to finish off any wounded units or threaten enemy characters also. Lastly, passing on the Dark Master in this mission and in this matchup was simply not a road I was willing to take. I was expecting my opponent to bring some form of ambushers and or scouts, because the Scions forces released so far aren't speedy enough to threaten my objectives, my brown objectives otherwise. And at the same time the Dark Master himself can ambush into the backline of my opponent and hence capture their objectives. I was looking to leverage this ability on the first round in tandem with the Varg and the Crow. I can get my full activation on one of my Varang units or characters, and then I can spend a command token to drop in the Dark Master to capture an objective at the same time, effectively getting to save my cake and eat it too. After talking about the game afterwards and also asking for his comments on this battle report, Danan reiterated his feeling that he's drawn towards factions that are very durable and building companies that can take a punch before delivering a punch in return. And he feels that probably the Mount Haven Dwarves are going to be the faction for him when they are eventually released. But by his own word, he's going to be playing the persecuted knife ears that are the Scions of Yaldabaoth until that day comes. Today's list that Tanan is fielding also comes in at 250 points and exactly 6 command tokens, and it's very much built around Nuada. Tanan told me that after the experience of running a cowering, supporting commander in the Rumpy Ride the last time we played, he wanted to try a more frontline focused commander in Nuada, and basically the rest of the list is built around making sure that the Elven General gets to have his moments, take the names and, and kill the foes, and everyone else is there to support him while he does so. For this exact purpose, Tanan is shelling out quite a lot of points for the Anointed and Needle combination, which will provide Nuada with some additional defenses, a solid, strong bodyguard unit that can block charge lanes and assist in combat if necessary, even offering some potential crowd control effects. and the needle can give access to some excellent recursion, as those who saw the first battle report can attest to. The Kipleacht is a ambushing large beast that is good for scenario play, and it can also be used opportunistically to ambush and attack targets that are unable to get away. Obviously, the presence of the Dark Master is going to be making the Kipleacht's life a lot more difficult, but at the same time Nuada offers some great synergy, since if the beast gets killed off, Nuada can potentially resurrect it with his bloodsucker poignard should he be able to load the blade to its fullest. Finally, the list is rounded out by yet another sturdy frontline unit in the Echoes, and another ambusher / assassin piece in the Namayon. And here we have the table for today's game. There are two structures, the tomb and the ruined tower. These block line of sight and are impassable for units to travel on. Then we have two dense forests that effectively simply end up having the block line of sight and cover blue keywords, since neither of us is running any cavalry units. Technically, golems would also be affected, but don't worry about it. Then we have a piece of ruins, which is a piece of rugged terrain with the cover blue special rule. We have a lake that's simply a piece of impassable terrain. And then we have two sets of fences. These are piles of blanks that we are using as fences, so they provide cover black. And then there are a couple of pieces of wall that have the cover blue special rule. Here you can see the brown objectives, and in the middle the hotly to be contested blue objective. I have cut these round areas to be placed under the objectives so that they denote the area from which the objective can be captured. I find this to be extremely convenient, since it means that we have to measure stuff from the objectives way less than we otherwise would, and I highly recommend doing the same if you have access to suitable material for this work. Note that even though the middle circle looks like a lake or frozen lake, it's not actually a piece of terrain. It's just something that I had lying around and that was of the right size, so I have chosen to use it here to simply mark the control area of the middle objective. Alright, let's get down to the deployment. Since both companies are rocking exactly the same amount of command tokens at 6, we are both rolling a single orange dice and a single yellow dice for our initiative roll. We actually tied this roll several times over before finally I managed to beat my opponent to it, getting to decide whether to keep the initiative or to choose which side to deploy on. Both of us were considering initiative to be a high priority in this game, since scoring the objectives at the end of each round would constitute an important element for our game going forward, so I was more than happy to win the roll and pick initiative instantly. My opponent then chose the table edge, preferring slightly the northern table edge over the southern one, so that's where he would start deploying next. Afterwards, Tanan communicated with me that he had a very clear game plan that he was looking to follow. He was going to charge at me through the center of the table and then he would try and break my forces in a prolonged melee fight before securing any objectives that would be necessary for him to win the game, and hence he starts deploying accordingly. Nuada is the first to take to the field, and he's deployed pretty much dead center in my opponent's deployment zone, ready to storm the blue objective in the middle of the table. I countered this by placing my orc hunters, thinking as I am that they are going to be my primary frontline unit early on, and hence the central position. Next, my opponent places his anointed right next to Nuada, and I counter this by trying to stall for time. So I placed Njord inside the hunters, but my opponent repays the favor by placing his needle in the anointed. As you are about to see going forward, I had to make a compromise between making this map readable with all the icons for the units and with it being entirely accurate as per to where the units are on the field, but I hope that the decisions I have taken each time help you see what's going on and at the same time is accurate enough to represent mostly what happened. I next choose to deploy my Tundra Marauders on the middle of the field rather than leaving them out scouting. I'm looking to use them with my Orc Hunters as this tag team that can tackle pretty much anything, hopefully, that my opponent throws at them. And since one is a Varang unit and the other is an Orc unit, they can use each other to trigger Alborg's, the Varg and the Crow command ability. That should grant me additional activations, and hopefully it should help me deal enough damage to stop my opponent from leveraging his recursion mechanics in the most important moments of the game. Since my opponent's list is so very tiny, a lazy painter's dream as he called it, the last unit that he gets to deploy at this time is the Echoes, so I have to deploy the rest of my stuff after. I choose to refuse my left flank, thinking that if my opponent wants to capture that brown objective, he will have to commit the Kipleact and the attached needle to do so. None of the forces he has deployed on the field are quick enough to achieve capturing that objective in a resource-effective manner, and that frees my Battle's Guard to guard the other objective and form a wall of angry orc around Alborg to make sure that my commander stays safe for the time being. My plan is to use the two infantry units that are not encumbered by the Namayon to advance forward, leaving the third one in reserve. And lo and behold, the Namayon comes in. My opponent first considers attaching the Namayon to my Tundra Marauders, but we have a talk about this and come to the conclusion that there's absolutely no point in him doing so, since the Hersir grants the unit the command skill not one step back. I can simply pay a command token and have the unit out the Namayon immediately at the start of the game and kill the dark-minded assassin off, and that's really poor return for Tanan's investment. Pretty much for the same reason, he also chooses not to attach the Namayon into my Orc Hunters, since the Orc Hunters have, thanks to Njord, access to a red and a yellow willpower dice, and they can add another success to their roll via Berserker Rage, so there's a real threat of them revealing the Namayon. For newer players who aren't familiar with this special Scions of Yaldabaoth model, the Namayon is an assassin that the Scions player can not only use as an ambusher, but they can also attach the model to an enemy unit at the start of the game. And while inside the enemy unit, the Namayon will at the beginning of each round kill off one of the members of the unit unless the unit passes a willpower test. This willpower test starts off at difficulty 3, so you need 3 successes in order to uncover the deadly threat. But each time the unit that the Namayon is attached to loses a model, this test becomes a point easier. So difficulty 3 on the first round, and if you fail and lose a model, then during the next beginning of round phase it's going to be a difficulty 2 and so forth and so forth. Obviously, if there are any casualties forthcoming from other places, that can also end up making the test easier to pass. With everything said and done, the Scions still have their Kipleacht and the attached needle held in reserve as ambushers, and I have my Dark Master waiting to ambush onto the battlefield. When it comes the time to assign the bounties, that is the enemy units that we are aiming to destroy, the discrepancy between the forces becomes quite apparent. The Scions of Yaldabaoth are running an extremely small, extremely durable, extremely elite force with a lot of healing and recursion mechanics in it, and I am running a larger list with more and / weaker units in them. In the end, I really only have 2 choices from which to pick my bounty. I can either pick the needle or the echoes. Picking the anointed doesn't make any sense, since I will have to destroy the needle before I get to destroy the last of the anointed anyway, so why go for the extra effort? I considered picking the echoes, but the fact that my opponent can just keep resurrecting them via assemble bodies command skill from the needle means that I'm not trusting in my ability to take them out. So I'm simply hoping that at any given point of the battle I can accumulate enough damage on the anointed to maybe trigger a double attack via the Tantrum Marauders' Tattoo of the Snow Leopard ability, or maybe via the Warg and the Crow, and take out the needle before there can be enough healing on the unit. My opponent decides that it's easier to go for a support character also, and they pick my Wise Mane for their bounty. Both of us are running really durable and capable high commands that are protected by elite bodyguard units, so going after each other's leaders isn't going to be all that easy. At the start of round 1, the battle scarred need to try and pass a difficulty willpower test in order to reveal the Namayon, and even though they get a double orange and a yellow courtesy of the Wise Mane, and they get access to a reroll, they fail to roll all successes and a single battle scarred is slain as a result. I'm not happy to see such an expensive model go, especially as that battle scar that I just lost is one of the models that Dana needs to take out in order to eventually get to my Wise Mane, but hey, there's really nothing I can do about it, and I'm pretty confident that I will be able to force the Namayon out at the beginning of round 2, thanks to the fact that the willpower test will be easier the next time around. Tanan starts the game off by sticking into his game plan and seeking to challenge the Northern Tribes forces into a slugfest in the middle of the table, and the advance is started by Nuada. Nuada takes care to end his first move short action within 5 strides of the anointed, which means that when he declares his second movement short action, is able to move forward and the anointed can trigger the Guardians of the Family ability, taking a point of stress to place themselves adjacent to Nuada, which effectively means that the Scions get to move 2 units for the price of 1, having to accept a small speed debuff on Nuada essentially, since he can't just run past the anointed on his first move as far as he otherwise could have. I consider what I see to be pretty much acceptable and what I was expecting would be happening, seeing the deployment that Tanan had prepared. So I sent Njot the Merciless and his Orc Hunters forward. The Hunters, as already stated, are a cheap unit that I'm willing to trade with should the occasion for such a maneuver arise, so in they go. Not chained by needing to stay within a certain distance of the anointed, the echoes then make a full steam advance towards the middle of the board and they manage to capture the middle objective. Tanan obviously chooses to assume the aspect of the defender on the echoes, granting them conquest 2, immovable and 4 wounds per model, so they are a really tough nut to crack. At this point, it also becomes very clear to me that simply brawling in the middle isn't going to win me the blue objective, no matter how much stuff I place there, since there is so much Scions of Yaldabaoth conquest available. Tanan was really happy to see pretty much all of his force concentrated in this one location, and he also made the note that this is a lazy painter stream playing a 250 point list of only 9 models. I am acutely aware of the fact that the echoes are in position to charge my Orc Hunters on the third Scion's turn should they choose to do so, but I'm more than willing to take this charge. The Orc Hunters should be able to hold their ground more or less. The only situation where the echoes render the Orc Hunters combat incapable or combat inefficient by causing more than half casualties is if the echoes roll the absolute maximum damage that their dice can provide, and I fail to roll absolutely any blocks on my orc unit. And this is what we call foreshadowing in the business. Even though things don't go quite as planned as you can imagine from saying that there is only a single exceedingly rare instance where what I'm trying to do here fails, I probably still would do what I did over again if we played the game more or less the same. If the Orc Hunters manage to roll quite well on their defense roll, then I can potentially use the combination of their natural switch ability, the automatic block provided by Njord, and his Berserker Rage ability to strip some wounds away from the rather costly echoes, and then they will be left open to a counter attack either by the Orc Hunters, the Tantrum Marauders, or even potentially a combination of the two using the command skill, the Varg and the Crow from my commander. But as you're going to see, the best laid plans and so forth. While Tanan's company is especially powerful, especially durable, and it moves rather efficiently, the low amount of total tactical elements that it incorporates means that there are actually not that many choices available for the Science Commander in this game at any given moment. And here Tanan takes the moment to, or the activation to use the echoes to charge the Orc Hunters. And obviously, from my foreshadowing, the thing that can only happen in the rarest of cases happens. The echoes roll the maximum amount of damage without needing to resort to a charge attack reroll, and I fail to produce absolutely any blocks on my defense roll, and I lose exactly 3 orc hunters in one fell swoop. So this is the one situation that I did not want to have to face, and now I'm dealing with a orc hunters unit that's incapable of trading up, and a unit that's not efficient in its combat maneuvers going forward. So my trap has failed since the echoes were able to inflict so much damage on me. Oh well, stuff happens. The echoes then choose to push back the hunters, and I don't want to suffer a stress, so I let the hunters get pushed back, thinking that I'll be countercharging with Njord as a result. Afterwards, Tanan was saying that he should not have pushed back the hunters, but I don't necessarily agree, because had he chosen not to push them back, I would have probably snow leopard tattooed into them with my marauders. Then I would have hit them twice effectively, and then triggered the Warg and the Crow to hit them with the Orc Hunter plus Nerd once more, and that could have been quite a devastating blow. So I think Tanan played this one exactly right. Swallowing my regrets, or rather my disappointment, I choose to have Njord abandon the Lone Orc Hunter and charge on his own. This is a powerful maneuver that Njord and characters like him can use after the rules update 1.5 to leave damaged units and go about their business, or why not full health units also. But I was hoping that I would get more mileage out of the Orc Hunters before having to resort to using my character Hersir in this way. But hey, beggars can't be choosers. Njord charges the echoes, uh, takes a point of stress to add his modifier to his attack roll, and due to inflicting damage upon the echoes gets to remove a stress after. So Njord is where he wants to be, in the thick of things, and he's managing his stress via the merciless keyword. Unfortunately, there is no other benefit to using this ability. Usually Merciless also inflicts the frightened state upon the unit at the receiving end of Njord's axe, but as we are dealing with elven ghosts over here, unfortunately no such effect is achieved. On his fourth turn, Tanan chooses to spring the Kipleacht ambush, and the beast appears at the edge of the forest, but entirely inside the forest that's next to the troops that I have rushed towards the middle of the table. Usually a ambushing unit has to respect a 10 stride distance between itself and any enemy units when it deploys, but this 10 stride restriction only applies if there is a line of sight between the units. And as the Kipleacht appears in a forest that blocks line of sight, there is no problem for it appearing there. Although this obviously restricts Tanan's options going forward, since as there is no line of sight, the beast cannot charge, but it has to resort into assaulting. The Dark Master is now obviously able to trigger his sharp intuition ability that allows my units to reposition around the Kipleacht, but Tanan has expertly picked his moment. Now that Njord is trapped in melee, he is going to be unable to move away from the Kipleacht, so the beast will get to attack no matter what I do. After shuffling my models around for a while and figuring what I want to do, I eventually choose to make sure that the Tundra Marauders get off safely. I move them away from the Kipleact and place my sole remaining Orc Hunter in a spot that denies the Kipleact a necessary landing spot for completing an assault against the Tundra Marauders. I figure that even though the Kipleact has a lot going for it, it shouldn't be all that dangerous against Njord, even though the Varang hero is already engaged in melee, so I'm willing to take an attack on him. The Kipleact obliges Njord and assaults the Varang character. Here's where, for the first time during this battle, the large keyword of the Kipleact comes in, and the beast is able to move over my Orc Hunter to get to Njord, which triggers a willpower test and a defense roll on the unfortunate Orc Hunter, but the probably psychologically quite scarred orc that's left standing alone manages to avoid the ill effects of this attack. When it comes to the actual melee between the Kipleact and Njord, not much happens, at least from the point of view of the Scions forces. Since the Kipleact does not have access to a charge attack reroll, there is no chance of it trying to improve its attack roll, and with Njord's high defense roll and elite, he's able to shrug off most of the damage. I choose to stress for extra performance, and this gives a defensive modifier to Njord of a red and an orange dice, and I actually choose to sacrifice the orange dice as my penalty for engaging several enemy units at once, which means that I have access to my full defense roll that mitigates most of the damage. The red dice actually manages to inflict a dice on the a wound on the Kipleact, and then I trigger Njord's Tattoo of Blood Eagle command skill, which allows him to roll 2 orange dice and stop a incoming point of damage for each success that he rolls. And after the dust settles, the Varang hero has suffered no damage, and actually it's the Kipleact that has taken a wound, and thus it has lost the combat. So I think that I have more or less managed to save this problematic situation, and now Kipleact is out there, and now I can try to counter it with my own forces. This also means that I am really confident that I have a very strong edge when it comes to the scenario play going forward, since my opponent has now revealed and expended his ambusher unit in combat maneuvers. On the Northern Tribe's 4th turn, I let loose the Tundra Marauders finally. And this is a decision that I have debated with myself ever since playing this game, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. With the Kipleact there engaged still with Njord, I chose not to push in order to trap the Kipleact in melee. The Tundra Marauders use Snow Leopard Tattoo to engage the beast and the accompanying needle, and they deliver a powerful or semi-powerful attack against it. My triple orange dice only give me a single success and no double special to cancel any blocks, which is unfortunate, but I do get 3 automatic successes by virtue of having the Hersir. The Tundra Marauders get 1 for themselves, and then I apply Berserker Rage, and then I proceed to use my second short skill for another melee attack against the Kipleact, and this time I take out the needle, and I think I maybe put a wound on the beast itself. And I feel that, okay, this is my chance to get ahead attrition wise and start inflicting casualties that are difficult for my opponent to replace. Whether this was the right decision to make, that can be debated, but I feel that if I can break the Scion's force here in the middle, then the game is as good as won, but obviously my opponent is thinking the same right here. Now that I have activated a Varang unit, I choose to trigger the Varg and the Crow. In this instance, for scenario play purposes, I drop in the Dark Master behind my enemy lines, and he simply walks over to capture one of my opponent's brown objectives, effectively meaning that at least for this round, it's pretty safe to say that I'm going to outscore my opponent when it comes to the brown objectives. When it comes to my opponent's fifth activation, one of the weaknesses of this type of list build comes in. With the Kipleact and the Echoes at full stress, there are very few options for my opponent to do, and as his units are not close enough to perform any attacks on me, they have to use the turn simply for repositioning. Then again, thanks to the Guardians of the Family ability, the Anointed are able to reposition alongside Nuada, and now they are well and truly in the middle of things, and they are going to be my problem going forward. My opponent doesn't go chasing after the Dark Master, which I feel is a correct thing to do. There is no guarantee that he can catch the blind orc, and even if he would, I don't think it would have the desired effect, because it would come at the cost of losing his remaining troops in the middle of the table. On my last turn of the first round, the Tundra Marauders finish off the Kipleact, and then I choose to Snow Leopard tattoo them into the Anointed. My thinking here is that okay, now the Kipleact is gone, at least for the time being, and I have a chance to push some damage through to the Anointed. I know that with such a high defense unit, there is no world where I'm going to take two models out of the unit and thus kill the needle in one go. So my plan is to force some chip damage in during this time, and then continue attacking them later, hoping to push enough wounds through on a wounded model to kill the first Anointed, and then proceed to take out the needle before any recursion or healing mechanics can kick in and ruin my plan to collect my bounty. And this is how things stand at the end of the first round. The Battle-Scarred and Aalborg get to use their no one gets left behind movement to inch forward, and actually now that I think back on it, writing this battle report, my Dark Master would also have gained a no one gets left behind movement, since the Varg and the Crow does not cause an activation token to be placed on the unit leveraging the ability, so I could have moved my Dark Master towards the middle of the table at this point. But oh well, you live and you learn, right? As the Northern Tribes control more brown objectives than the opposing Scions at the end of the first round, I gain 2 military points, but my opponent is holding the middle objective quite firmly, so that's 1 military point for them. So we end the first round 2-1 military points for the Northern Tribes, and initiative changes hands, and it lands with the Scions of Yaldabaoth. As I was already expecting, the Battle-Scarred passed their difficulty 2 willpower test to reveal the Namayon. It takes a reroll from the Wise Main, but we finally get there. My opponent deploys the Namayon in front of the unit engaged with them as a means of trying to slow them down, and we are off to the races. as my opponent has the initiative, he chooses to be the one to activate first. Due to the impossible and line of sight blocking terrain piece in the middle of the table, the objective, and his own friendly unit of the anointed, Nuada is unable to perform a charge to attack the Tundra Marauders that have landed behind the anointed, but he's able to use his high movement score to assault them, and while assaulting does not grant the reroll on the attack roll that the charge would give, the Elven general does not really need this reroll at this time. Nuada easily butchers the rest of the Marauders and quite critically causes 2 wounds on my poor Hersir, and this is really the catastrophic situation that I wanted to avoid at all costs. I'm totally fine losing the Hersir as long as I get to deal some damage in return, but the primary damage driver that gets the Hersir above OK into the excellent range is the Tattoo of Sturkrige, and as Tattoo of Sturkrige is effectively a juiced up version of the Berserker Rage, it uses the wounds of the Hersir as its primary resource, and now that my Hersir has lost 2 of his 3 wounds, he is unable to access Berserker Rage here on out, so his damage potential is greatly reduced, and I effectively have to leave him dead in the water. In an ideal world, I would have now been able to use the Hersir to counter-attack either Nuada or do a last-ditch charge against the Anointed, but would have, should have, could have, right. I think this instance also shows both of us, both me and Tanan, how terrifying Nuada is when he gets going in melee. And that's not a pretty sight, to be sure. I'm trying to get over my disappointment on how things went with the Hersir, but there's no cause or no use crying over spilled milk, so it's time for me to try and improve my position. Now that the Namayon is out, one of my first priorities is going to be to destroy the Elven Assassin, removing any potential threat against Aalborg for the time being, and also freeing the Battle Scarred to participate in the brawl that is happening in the middle of the board. In the end, I choose to take out the Namayon via the Warg and the Crow, since I don't feel that I need this command skill this turn for scenario plays. So what I do is that I actually start off by activating Njord and chopping down one of the echoes facing him. This allows Njord to again manage his stress situation, and with the Warg and the Crow, the Battle Scarred get to activate without having to take a activation token or having to suffer stress, and they easily wipe out the Namayon, although I choose to push for the additional performance in melee to make sure that I paste the Dark Elf standing before me. Unfortunately, before he goes down, Namayon is able to trigger his defensive switch that causes vulnerable on my battle-hardened orcs, but hey, that's a price I have to pay. But now that the Battle Scarred have destroyed an entire enemy unit, they get a free short movement action, and I reposition them towards the middle of the board. If I'm able to destroy the last echo before my opponent can resurrect any, then I should be golden. Unfortunately, my opponent also knows that this is the situation and quickly works to invalidate the damage I have been causing. Tanan activates Anointed and uses the needle attached to the unit to return a echo to the play and thus spread frightened states to Njord and the lone orc hunter. I'm not actually all that worried about getting Njord frightened, since I can always cause a wound on him via his own Berserker Rage, should that become necessary, and thanks to his Tattoo of the Cavern Lion ability, he becomes fearless after having taken the first wound, which would also remove the frightened state, so no problem there, I feel. But this whole returning models into play thing sucks from my point of view quite a lot, and what's actually even worse is that my opponent succeeds with flying colors on his willpower roll to use Stitch Up Muscles, which allows him to fully heal the wounded anointed, thus undoing all the hard work that my now long dead Tantra Marauders did. And at this point, with the Hersir on his last wound and the anointed back to full health, I more or less have to concede the fact that unless something goes drastically wrong for my opponent, I'm not going to be claiming the bounty. I will not be able to take down that needle with the forces that I have left, and I have to search for other avenues of victory going forward. I consider for a while whether I dare throw the battle scarred into the fray, since the wise mane that my opponent is looking to destroy for that arcane point is and shall remain with the unit, but with fully healthy Njord there protecting them with his counter charge potential, I go ahead and throw the battle scarred into the fray. They take out again one of the echoes, leaving the other one there to be a pain in my behind. But hey, this is the life of a person playing against the the current iteration of the Scions of Yaldabaoth. Soon to be changed, I trust, with the general release of the faction. Here, my opponent, next during his 8th turn, is very smartly playing the long game. While the Hersir is not a meaningful threat to him at this point, taking out this character does grant some additional movement for Nuada, and more importantly, it allows the elven hero to fuel his bloodsucker poignard, thus giving Tanan access to yet another recursion tool for use later during the game. I'm sad to see the Hersir go, obviously, but after suffering those 2 wounds, he was effectively dead to me anyway. So this is something that I had already gotten over at this point anyway. Luckily enough, my Hersir does manage to inflict the disarmed state upon Nuada before he goes down. So hey, at least that's something. During my 8th turn, I try to get back on the board and swing the attrition ever so slightly back towards my corner, but I am preoccupied with all the stuff that's going on around the battlefield and my deteriorating situation, so I end up making a half-hearted attempt at taking out the last echo, and the battle scarred fail miserably, failing to do actually any damage to the last remaining enemy that they are engaged with. What I really should have been doing here is taking a careful stock of my situation, and having decided to engage the echo or attack the echo again, I should have pulled all the stops and made sure that the job gets done. I'm talking taking advantage of potentially both of my stress modifiers and probably even fixing a die with the Wise Man's command skill in order to make sure that I finally put down the echo and free up the battle scar to do other stuff. But my failure to think things through has resulted in me throwing away a valuable activation that I really could not afford to lose at this time. At this point of the battle, both me and Tanan are looking at each other and actually quite openly talking about how a confrontation between Nuada and Njord is getting inevitable at this point, and also this is going to be a meeting that will effectively decide who wins this whole scuffle over the middle objective. Obviously, we are also talking about my opponent's commander, and should they fall, then the game is surely as good as won for me. No other charges, Njord, and the Anointed yet again place themselves next to Nuada in order to provide that automatic block symbol for his attack and defense rolls, and also to help trap my lone orc hunter so as to keep him away from attacking Nuada going forward. Njord is actually able to hold his ground against the onslaught of Nuada, thanks to again accessing Tattoo of the Blood Eagle, and thanks to the fact that Nuada is suffering from the disarmed state inflicted by the heresy that allows me to reduce the incoming damage. Eventually, both heroes walk away from this round of fighting wounded, but still ready to go again. And I feel that this is now my moment to take out Nuada if there ever is going to be one. I have managed to wound the Elven General in retaliation, and now I have the keys in my hand to try and finish the job. Unfortunately, when I proceed to try and grasp at that chance, I am unable to claim the prize. At this point, I realize how terrifically powerful the defensive push modifier of Nuada is. He's able to mitigate most of my damage despite me pulling no punches and throwing everything at the wall. And at this point I have to concede the fact that okay, today Nuada was simply too powerful for me, and I'm not going to be able to win the attrition fight in the middle. My opponent then activates Nuada, triggers Liquid Orichalcum, his command skill, which allows Nuada to heal all damage done to him and shed all his stress, and then he proceeds to take out Njord once and for all. At this point, Njord is at 1 wound remaining, so I'm rolling quite a few dice against Nuada in red and orange dice to inflict damage upon him also, but it's just too little and too late, and now that there is nothing that I can use to finish my opponent's commander off, there's nothing stopping him from simply using Liquid Orichalcum over and over again to heal his wounds and remove any stress that he might be forced to take as a result. This is something that with the current 1.5 rules update changes to how the Scions especially work with tinge. There is really no danger in Nuada taking copious amounts of tinge via Liquid Orichalcum, and my opponent is using this ability to the best of its advantage. If there is anything to be salvaged from this rather bad situation, at least Nuada, while he's able to reposition towards threatening Aalborg after destroying Njord, he does suffer the slowed state due to the random negative effect that his so far accumulated tinge causes him. And this allows me to use my last activation of this round to simply shift Aalborg away from Nuada. At this point I don't want to test my chances against Nuada, and I am very doubtful that even Aalborg could take out the his elven adversary, even if Tanan was gracious enough to grant me a charge. So at this point discretion has to be the better part of valor. At the end of the second round, the only no one gets left behind move that there is available to either of our forces is my Dark Master, and I choose to bring him slightly closer towards the middle of the board, thinking that hey, at least he can remain a scoring threat towards the middle objective if nothing else. Due to having tinge on his card, Nuada now has to accept the effects of tinge automatically at the end of the round, but as a science model he gets to roll on his own table, and the resulting roll triggers slowed state upon the Elven General. At this point, Tanan would like me to remind all the kids back at home that winners don't do liquid orichalcum, so stay away from the nasty stuff and keep your nose clean, so to speak. At the end of the second round, I feel that when it comes to the tactical situation in the most important fights in the middle of the table, I have basically lost my ability to hold the line, but at the same time, scenario playing wise, I'm hanging in there. Thanks to the heroics of my Dark Master, I have been able to again secure more brown objectives than my opponent, and he can only effectively slow down the bleeding by holding the center. So we are going to the last round with the Northern Tribes in a, for this scenario, rather commanding 4-2 military point lead. If the first two rounds were about jockeying for position and then fighting a all-out war in the middle of the table, the last round simply has to be about me trying to survive against a science company that has won the attrition fight against me. Nuada advances forward, looking to hem Aalborg in, but thanks to the fact that he's slowed, he's unable to make all that great a progress. He triggers Liquid Orichalcum again to remove all the wounds that Njord inflicted before he went down, and now he's also able to use his fully charged Bloodsucker Poignard to return the Kipleacht into the play. I have to admit that I had all but forgotten in the heat of the combat, in the heat of the battle, that this was actually something that Nuada could do, and now Aalborg is feeling quite threatened with a murderous Elven general bearing on him from one side of the lake and a terrible tentacle monster coming at him from the opposite side. So there are no great choices available for Aalborg at this stage. On the Northern Tribe's 11th turn, I finally do what I should have done previously when I chose to attack the echoes with my battle scarred, and I not only trigger a push modifier that inflicts an automatic wound, but I also choose to apply the Voice of Experience command ability of the Wise Mane to fix another die, and thus I managed to destroy the last troublesome echo without even needing to actually roll any dice. I then used the destroyed unit granted additional movement to reposition my battle scarred in an attempt to screen Aalborg and stop the Gipleacht from engaging him. Actually, under the stress of a battle that's not going also swimmingly for me at this point, I again failed to take note of the fact that as a large model, the Kipleacht can actually move past my screening battle scarred, and I actually should have prioritized stopping the beast from landing at spots that gets him to Aalborg, but luckily enough, distance came to be my savior in the end. On my opponent's 12th turn, the Kipleacht goes in, and if the beast's first charge against, or first assault I should say, against Nuada was a resounding failure, this one is a huge victory for the ambushing beast. Again, I'm faced with a situation where the only way that I lose my wise main, that is the contract my opponent is hunting and a really powerful force multiplier for my battle scarred, is that my opponent rolls the absolute full amount of damage possible with his dice and I fail to roll any blocks. And obviously, as you can imagine, this happens once again and I lose all but one of the battle scarred and my wise main to boot. But while I would love to moan and shout and whimper about the dice here, this is entirely on me. I had the command token available to access experience and wisdom. Or charisma and wisdom, it's called, I think. Whatever the wise man's command skill to fix a die, which would have gotten me out of this situation, and there's absolutely no reason why I shouldn't have used it here. I have lost all my Varang units by now, so I cannot access the Varg and the Crow during this last round. Njord is dead in the dirt, so I have nobody, and the Herser is gone also. So there's absolutely no one else to use the command token on, so I should have fixed the die and gotten me out of this mess, but hey, this is my doing, so now I have to sleep in the bed that I have made. This situation also now causes one of the changes from the 1.5 update to materialize on the field. The lone battle scarred is now over stress, and since the wise man is gone, his moral value drops from 3 to 2, and now that he is at 4 stress, he is more than a point over his limit, his moral limit, which means that he will require double success on his double orange willpower roll not to break and flee. And I failed this roll, and my last battle scarred hightails it for the hills. But at this point the damage is already done. I really don't care about that last battle scarred. It was the wise main that I would have wanted to keep alive. So effectively at this point my opponent scores a arcane point for himself. While I'm not comfortable having Aalborg fight Nuada, the tentacle beast standing before him is a whole another matter. I charge Aalborg at Kipleacht and wipe the beast out easily, granting me additional movement that I then use to get further away from Nuada. I think that he's ultimately the only credible threat that can reliably take out Aalborg, and as long as I can avoid him, I should be able to limp into a win via the scenario element of this adventure. And then it's time to raise our hands, for we have made a mistake. Last time around it was that we misread how the scenario works, and that was our mistake. Okay, this time we read and reread the scenario several times over to make sure we got it right. But this time what we failed to do in the excitement of the moment is to advance the turn tracker once during the last round. So hey, trust me, I know what I'm doing. I just don't know how to read and I don't know how to count to 15. But other than that, I'm a great wargamer. So that's what you have come here for, all of you. As there are not that many activations left at this point anyway, I'm going to show you how we played the game until the end without realizing this mistake until I started to put this battle report together, and then I'm shortly going to talk what should have probably happened had we known that we actually had less time, less activations to make than what we actually ended up doing. My opponent is acutely aware that the only way that he can get back to the game is by taking out Aalborg, and since Nuada is so far away and has no realistic chance of achieving this, the Anointed are the only ones up for the job. So the Guardians wipe out the last Orc Hunter and use the resulting movement to try and corner Aalborg. Seeing the threat, Aalborg does whatever a powerful and vicious orc commander does in such a situation and hightails it for the hills like a small whimpering child. The Anointed, at this point full on stress, have to rest in order to keep the chase alive, and Aalborg puts himself full of stress, putting as much distance between himself and the Anointed as possible. I fail to rally the battle scarred who keeps fleeing but does not get the mercy of fleeing off table, and he's left hanging out there. During the 15th turn, the Anointed finally get a clear line on Aalborg. I failed to take a picture of this, but they actually end up so close to Aalborg that resting and would not get Aalborg far enough away from his assailants, so we consider at this point that melee is inevitable, even though in truth this would have been the last activation of the Scions and they would have been unable to charge Aalborg during their next activation, since no activation would have been forthcoming. I decide to make sure that I at least don't lose the game by rushing the Dark Master to the middle of the table, hence I managed to capture the blue objective. My opponent uses the last activation that he has to charge Aalborg, but their attack bounces off. I think they only inflict a single wound on Aalborg, who then passes his willpower test to not flee, and this essentially ends the game with the Northern Tribe's leader still standing. Afterwards, when I message my friend about how we messed up the ending of the game in this way, he jokingly said that there is going to be a day when somebody plays a game of competitive Warcrow entirely right, but it's not this game. And with years of Infinity experience between us, yeah, this stuff happens, and in Infinity mistakes are also made all of the time. So let's not dwell on that too much, shall we? Had we realized that there's actually a single turn per player less than what we actually ended up playing. There are some options that my opponent could have taken, but his options would not have been great, and this is what I eventually came up that would have probably been the best case scenario. So I think the Anointed should have taken out the Hunter and then retreated to cover the middle of the table against the Dark Master. The Dark Master would have answered this by capturing the second brown objective of my opponent's, and Nuada could have done the same for one of mine, but this would have essentially been it. Technically, there would have been a world where the Anointed could have tried to capture my second brown objective also, but the problem with this route is the fact that they would have been full on stress, and Aalborg would have gotten a charge off on them, which would have risked the unit breaking and or Aalborg being able to kill the needle at some point. So I don't think that would have necessarily been a realistic way of ending the game. So I think this is more or less what we should have expected the game end up as, had we realized the situation on how many turns there were left. So at the end of round 3, Nuada, as per the new Tinge rules, suffers yet another negative effect. This time the randomization forces another slowed token on him, or slow token on him yet again, but it actually makes no difference when it comes to the end result of the game. Again, I think at this point my opponent has accessed Liquid Orichalcum 3 times throughout the battle, and it has meant that the Elven General is at 6 tinge, but he's suffering little to no ill effects due to this. So I'm starting to think that maybe Nuada needs something of a rework going forward. The game ends scoring wise with the Northern Tribes able to secure a total of 6 military points, thanks to being able to have more brown objectives on each round of the game, and a single arcane point for the fact that Aalborg is still very much alive. The Scions of Yaldabaoth collect 3 military points for holding the blue objective in the middle of the table throughout the game, and they also receive 2 arcane points, one for keeping their commander alive and another one for wiping out their contract. So the end score is 7 for the Northern Tribes and 5 for the Scions. This means that the game ends with the Northern Tribes achieving a partial triumph and the Scions of Yaldabaoth suffering a tactical retreat. Okay, some final thoughts from the point of view of the Scions of Yaldabaoth player for this one. We had a talk after the game and we have been exchanging messages ever since. And it feels that Tanan is of the mind that his battle plan worked more or less as he intended, and he was actually able to achieve what he set out to do, and that was breaking the orcs in a straight up combat in the middle of the table. If anything, it just took slightly too long for him to be also able to hunt down Aalborg, which would have probably secured him a handsome win in this battle. So I was effectively saved by the bell. We were also talking with Danan or I was telling him rather how masterfully I feel that he played Nuada in this one. He made sure to keep the anointed nearby always when it was feasible, as per to add that all important additional automatic block to all of Noada's um, roles, and also he didn't overextend Nuada at any point in a way that would have allowed me to go out and kill my opponent's commander. Really, the deciding point of the game came down when Nuada and Njord were facing one another, but Tanan really constructed that situation as well as he could. So I think justice prevailed when he was able to claim the victory in that duel ultimately. Tanan was also talking how he liked Kipleacht, how Ambusher is a great rule, and how large makes the beast extremely versatile when it comes to positioning, and you can do a lot of movement shenanigans, even trampling through your own troops effectively in some situations. But he's not sure about attaching the needle. Even though the needle does add whopping 5 wounds to the unit, that's pretty much what it brings to the table in this combination. You are paying almost double for the unit, and assemble bodies really isn't reliable on a single yellow dice willpower, and the black dice, yellow dice on attack defense aren't all that impactful on the Kipleacht, and the fact that the needle does not provide any additional morale really hurts, since in this game the Kipleacht got full of stress rather quickly, which made it not such a big threat in melee afterwards. Okay, and then some final thoughts from the northern tribes. Oof, that was tough. Even though I did manage to scrape together a win in the end, I definitely felt like my opponent was outplaying me in this one. I looking back at things, I definitely feel that I got lost in my tactical decisions, and I failed to have a cohesive strategy throughout the game, and that really worked against me, so to speak. I should have been more careful in reading what my opponent was trying to achieve and how he was trying to get there. Because had I done this, I think there would have been tools at my disposal to make the game even harder for my opponent, and I feel that I somewhat unnecessarily allowed him to grind me down and threaten me towards the end of the game. So he definitely outplayed me on this one, both from army list building perspective and also when it comes to the tactical decisions he executed on the field of battle. When it comes to the company that I was fielding, I really have some mixed feelings. The Vark and the Crow did some decent enough work early on, but at the same time I really don't know that it was really worth it in this game. I was unable to access this powerful command ability during the last round, and I did feel that I had so many points resting in few characters, and in the case of Alborg, on a character that I did not actually even want to engage with due to the feat that we were playing. So I'm not entirely sure how to evaluate Alborg's performance. Then again, one does have to take into account the fact that Nuada is one of the few models in the entire game that can slap Alborg around if they meet on the field of battle. So in that way also Alborg was in quite a difficult spot during this game. I really enjoyed playing the variant characters that I chose today, but the Tantrum Marauders weren't as great as I was hoping them to be. Then again, there were really few soft targets for them to take advantage of in the army list that my opponent had constructed today. So they were pretty much hemmed in between the rock and the hard place. But looking back, I probably should have used them more as a maneuver element and not so much as a frontline combat unit. I feel that punching all my troops in the middle, I lined them up for my opponent to knock down, and he succeeded at this swimmingly. So that one was also on me. I can't wait to get some cavalry on the table going forward. I have some Warc Riders coming to me at some point, and I really like the Mounted Wrathmane's card, and I'm really looking forward to playing him. We are trying to schedule our next game, and let's see if I can work my magic on yet another battle report going forward. Okay, not such a solid performance by the Northern Tribes this time around, but hey, eventually they managed to get the job done. Safe travels to you all, fellow travelers, and huge and special thanks to Tanan for playing these games with me. Hope to see you again soon.